It is Tuesday. It is 8 o'clock, beginning the 8 o'clock hour. We got to talk with our quarterback. We love talking with Sean Salisbury each and every week. And let's bring him in here on the show. Sean, it's Jason. How are you?
Jason, I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad we always get a chance to talk to you. I was thinking about you when the Niners were playing the Chiefs this weekend. I said, I'm going to ask Sean about this because he's been under center. He's been in a huddle. You've had to look at a defense pre-snap, post-snap. And that. So the Niners just played Steve Spagnola and the Chiefs, and he may be the best defensive coordinator, if not one of them out there. When you got to, you broke huddle, you're going to the line of scrimmage, kind of take us through what you're looking at and what makes a great coordinator that honestly is there to trick you and trick your plays and goof on you guys. What do they do that's so successful that's hurt some of these quarterbacks?
I think there's a couple things. One is, as a coordinator, on both sides, defense, you're trying to create chaos and indecision, even when it's a simple protect. They just use an example. Last week here and in Houston, you watched the Texas Longhorn-Georgia game. You saw the confusion up front that physical teams that are willing, and even when you're rushing 3 and 4, it felt to the offensive line like they were rushing 5. There was like 12 or 13 pressures on Stroud and 13 dropbacks. And in the Texas game, everybody watched Georgia manhandle them physically. But a lot of times it wasn't 6 and 7 man or 5 man pressures. So you're trying to create confusion and you're trying to get your quarterback thinking it's one thing while you're doing another. That's one. Two is you obviously are looking for the weakness. That's the goal of everybody. On offense, our goal is to find the single guy if we can get man coverage and then make it look more difficult to you and more simple for us. But whether it's formations and emotions and personnel groupings, we're trying to put you in a position. We're trying to create our best guy on your third best guy, our running back on your linebacker in the pass game, our number one receiver motioning down to slot. And now we got the nickel covering him as opposed to your best cover guy. So you're just trying to create mismatches on both sides of the ball. And that's what it's for. Now, if I'm playing Spagnola, and he is the best defensive coordinator in the league right now, especially in big games. He's big game. I mean, he always has his best for big games. Is one, he calls his defense. He doesn't make the square peg in a round hole where, let's say he wants to pressure, that if he had a zone type team that wasn't used to pressuring, that he forces them in defensive situations that make them uncomfortable. They're not strength. He plays to their strengths. Now they're fortunate. They can play zone on the back end. They can blitz you. They can play pressure. They got a big guy. I believe you build defenses inside out. They got the most fierce inside outside guy who's versatile in the run game, pushes it back and can get pressures on the quarterback and Jones from the inside. You can't chip an inside defensive tackle. So you got to double him, which creates problems for the other guys on the outside to go put pressure on you and makes them better. So, for me in watching this game, confusion up front, but they gave Brock a lot of looks. But when you play Spagnola, and any team, I would always, if you're playing Flores in Minnesota right now, I'm one that always prepares for the major conflict. And then if they don't give you the pressure man or man coverage, and we as quarterbacks love man because it's a single matchup, but if they don't pressure you and they play zone, then you adjust to that. It's not the other way. Because it's too fast. If you always thinking zone, and then all of a sudden you get a team that's going to blitz you 55% or 60% of the time or play man coverage all the time and you're thinking zone, it'll happen too fast. You got to think biggest conflict and adjust down, not the easiest way to approach it and adjust up. That's the hardest thing to do. And if Brock's not on time, and I love him, I think he's a wonderful player, but he's a guy that where there's a little bit of physical limitation. If he's not on time or he's hesitant, the ball's not going to be. If you're Brett Favre, you can be a little late or Elway and throw it, you're going to get it, or Mahomes. He's got to be on time and precise and dynamic in his decisions. And another thing, you mentioned pre-snap and post-snap. There's no doubt Spagnola's trying to get you think man, play zone. Think zone, play man. Think it's going to be a 4-week blitz, but they bring the strong safety off the strong side and drop back into zone. So he is very good at knowing and studying your weaknesses. And he found what was a weakness this week in Brock Purdy beating man coverage and with injuries and guys from Aiyuk and Jennings being banged up and not having McCaffrey, the great equalizer out of the backfield to create that mismatch. Brock just couldn't overcome it. And it was as careless with the football as I've seen him be all probably in the last couple of years.
And so you guys get such so comfortable with your receivers, especially your primary, maybe your number 2, your number 3. So if Brock, and I think on time is the perfect way to describe him, Sean, because you're right. Like when he's on time, he's just got it. He can read, react, and get the ball on time and on target. But how much of a factor is it when Deebo was ill and Aiyuk got hurt and they didn't have Jennings? Now they got 4, 5, and 6. Those guys all have to play. No excuses. But did that affect the on-time part of what Brock's reading out there?
Sure it does. And he looked like Spagnola. But think about this. And Brady even had mentioned it on a broadcast with Spagnola, on that broadcast, right? It was Brady doing the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. On that broadcast he said he's been the bane of his existence, Spagnola. And back then, remember, they used to rush 4 with the Giants, get pressure with 4 and play however they wanted to on the back end. So Spag's been doing this in big games for a long time. If I were to say, let's compare it there. If I said Mahomes had no Kelsey, now even Kareem Hunt and Pacheco are down, and Xavier Worthy's down, and their right tackle or their left tackle's down, and Andy Reid's got the flu. Would it affect them? Sure it would. McCaffrey, Deebo, Jennings, Aiyuk. Yeah, it changes it. And it's not even the fact that you don't trust the fourth guy. It's, does the fourth guy get there like Aiyuk would? Does the coverage now, double Kittle if they're going to do playing it out him, force somebody out to beat you? And so in your mind as a quarterback, you're thinking, and I don't have McCaffrey either. Even though they run the ball well, they still run it well. But the McCaffrey threat in play action in the passing game makes you defend different and uses up your practice time during the week. Because Spagnola, I guarantee you, if he was in this game, he would have pressured, but he would have had to do things different. Knowing McCaffrey and his ability to create mismatches out of the backfield would have been a problem. And that's a problem for everybody. So Spags is brilliant at it. So yes, I love it when people say, they lost 2 receivers. It's not that big a deal. Of course it is. Especially Brock has got to have, and he made the throw to Aiyuk early that he dropped. When you're playing in games like this, those are the ones you just can't miss. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones you have to make. And I know it's tough, but when they hit you in the hands, because every yard against Spagnola or against the Flores, you're going to have to work for. It's like when a lineup in baseball has 8 guys deep, and you're like, gosh, the 8th hitter. I think about the Astros when they were playing their best baseball these last handful of years, or the Dodgers, or when they're loaded and your 8 hitter could be hitting in a 2-hole for somebody else.
Right.
It's like it's exhausting for a pitcher. A lot of times they get to the 7th hitter, they say, okay, 7, 8, 9, I'm going to work my way through this. But when you got guys in the lower part of the lineup that are putting them MVP numbers, it's exhausting. It's the same thing here. Every single snap, you have got, where's it coming this time? So 65 plays of mental and emotional exhaustion, let alone the physical beatdown they give you. But Spags is excellent at finding your weakness, making you try to work somewhere else and not being able to stop that part. But he doesn't live with one play or one defense or one stunt. He is going to be exotic when he needs to and multiple. But even when he's simple, he makes it look complex to the offense. And Brock Purdy had a tough time getting it. But who wouldn't have when you got 4 of your best weapons not finishing a game?
Yeah.
Tough to do.
Talking with Sean Salisbury here. Sean, more QB talk. Why do you think Mike Tomlin went with Russell Wilson this week?
For the result you got. We from a distance, Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. I trust from a distance, you say, why? 4-2. He's had a couple games, did Fields. He's more active with his feet. His feet are like what Russ's used to be, right? When he started with Seattle, Russ isn't as apt to use his legs to win games for him anymore. You're getting along in age. He's 35 years old. And I think a lot of people, and even on the pregame shows and stuff that, you see it, is everybody, why? Well, Tomlin's in the meeting rooms. Tomlin knows the pulse of his team, and he's right most of the time. So even I said, Russ Wilson's got to prove that he deserves the job back. I think they saw in decision-making, they're 4-2, and Fields, is not as precise a passer that you want. He's just not there yet. And will he ever be? Who knows? But he's a physically gifted kid. And then there's the mental part of being in the league a long time, where defenses, you're not going to get that confused. And Russ Wilson's been in the league long enough where he should understand what somebody's trying to do to him. So while most of us going in said, well, I'd like to see Fields at 4-2, it takes guts to bench a guy when you're 4-2. It just does, even when they're playing okay, not great. Well, he did it, and the early start made it look like, bad decision. Well, probably part of the reason. Russ fought his way through it. Russ has got a long way to go to get back to Russ Wilson, but he did some decent things in Denver. And that's a football town. They don't want excuses and they don't want cheesy stuff. They want a quarterback who's like them, blue collar, tough. When you're not playing well, find a way to win. And he gave it to him, and he fought back and looked like Russ Wilson in the past at times. So I think what it is that Coach Tomlin trusted that Russ Wilson could overcome what inevitably you're going to face. You're going to have to beat him throwing from the pocket at times. You're going to face adversity. And in order to win this game, we got to have a guy who's been in this plenty of times. That's why they brought him there. So he gave him an opportunity to prove it, and at least it earned him another week, and we'll see where he goes from here. But who knows if Fields would have been able to overcome that. And while we question the decision, it ended up being the right one. And that's why from a distance, we're not sitting in meeting rooms to know what goes on in the meeting rooms or on the practice field. A lot of times you got to trust the coach, and it takes guts to bench somebody when you're 4-2, regardless of how they're playing, because of momentum. And there you go. Russ Wilson in a big game took care of his business to get that win.
Sean,
outplayed Aaron Rodgers. He did.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, there are better teams, or better records, I should say, than what the Ravens have. But watching Henry run the way he is and the way Lamar is playing as good as any of the years he won the MVP, how dangerous are the Ravens?
They're the best team in football right now. I know the Chiefs, but you look at the Chiefs, they make a offense. Now, defensively, they're nasty, as we just discussed. But offensively, Kelsey started the season slow. Mahomes has got more picks than touchdown passes, but then he makes the sideline run. 3rd and 12, he'll complete it. They're getting the production at the right time. Kareem Hunt, coming back and now filling in for Pacheco as a guy who's been there before. And we thought, well, his career is on the downside and he's revitalized it. So, and you got Andy Reid. So, but that offensively, I can name 8 teams that I'd trust more offensively. It's just the quarterback knows how to make spectacular plays, and we haven't seen their best offensive performance. But that being said, as far as a complete team kicking game, defense, offensively running the football, Derrick Henry's the MVP in the league, not Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry's the MVP on that team right now. And think about his body. Instead of what he's had to get 35 carries to get the production, 15 carries for $167. So he's getting just as much production and not touching more because of Lamar's threat to run it, throw it. I think the Texans right now, the Ravens, probably Detroit in the NFC. You can make a case for 3 teams in the NFC, but Detroit, the way they play, I love Ben Johnson's approach. That's in the NFC. AFC, I don't think there's a better team. And I think right now, if the Super Bowl were next week and I had to bet $100,000 on one team and I couldn't spread it around, I would bet that the Baltimore Ravens are the team to beat, even though their record doesn't say it. If they played on a neutral field right now, I would take Baltimore to beat Kansas City, even though Lamar has struggled beating Mahomes.
All right, we'll get you out of here on this one, Sean. Last thing, if I asked you the same question, same kind of wager you had to make on college football, who are you putting that money on?
That's so ironic. We had that conversation this morning. I can't remember a time this late in the season I didn't feel there was a clear-cut 1 or 2 teams that were the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Alabama in the past, Georgia, or Michigan last year. He said, listen, it's these 2, and then maybe there's a Florida State last year that can come in, or this year, is it Indiana? There's 10 teams. We went through the top 15. I'm like, well, damn. Well, this team can't, because you think about Georgia's not going away. They showed they're big boys on defense and they're physical. Texas should be able to gather themselves and come back at it, but the SEC is different. And then you look at the Oregon. I mean, they're going to be tough. Ohio State won't go away. I mean, look at the Penn State's hanging around. Indiana, I don't know, it's Indiana, Vanderbilt, Army, and Navy. I mean, but I'm not saying they're going to win the title, but I can take the 8th team right now and say, it's worth it. But if I had to, and Carson Beck's going to have to play better. The way Kirby Smart coaches and as physically nasty as they can be, even though offensively they don't look great, I'd probably put it on them. But I love the teams like Miami and Oregon who have playmaking, consistent quarterbacks that are physical but also have team speed. I'd probably say Georgia, but the truth is, right now, Oregon and Miami with their quarterbacks can probably put up as good a fight as any. But this is that year. The 9th team in the country right now can beat the 1 team, and I wouldn't know who to bet right now if it was just straight up. That's what this has created, because we do not have a great team. I'm talking about a great team. It's a clear-cut, no doubt, best team in the country. We don't have that this year.
It's going to make it fun. That's for sure.
Yes, it is. I love it. Yeah. I agree. When we got the military academies, Vanderbilt, Indiana, Iowa State, that are all players, that are all in the Boise State, watching that kid run, Yeah, man, I love this part of it where there's really no villain right now, but there's a whole lot of teams that can get in there and win this thing.
Yeah, we appreciate your time as always, Sean. We look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great week.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. That's the great Sean Salisbury giving us some insight on quarterbacks and certainly on college football. He's so right. I mean, it is as wide open as ever. He also referenced that he said the MVP of that team right now is Derrick Henry. We'll look back on the night of NFL action. 2 games last night, completely different types of games. We'll look back at those. Still 4 down.